a big topic we really wanted to cover with you guys in this session is staying focused on early stage, not having a growth fund, especially when your entire peer set has become life cycle capital providers. Yeah. And I actually think this is a good entry into it. So, Peter, the story you just told of like when things are not going right, the benchmark approach, I'm actually really curious when things are going right. Your competitive set has said when things are going right, we should go long. We are going to interpret that, I think in large part as a competitive response to you guys during the Fab 4 era. We are going to become life cycle capital providers. We're going to put a ton of money round after round after round into our best winners.
That wasn't in response to benchmark. That was in response to there's a crap ton of fees to make on. And the founders will keep taking our money, and we have the brand with LPs.
Yes.
That was like benchmark stayed so true to their thing that.
Okay, I think there are three classes of firms. Yeah. There's a class of firm that fit that.
Yeah. There's
benchmark. And then there's a class of firm that actually we're making a strategic decision. We care about carry. We're playing for carry. We think we can.
100%.
Yeah. And those were valid decisions on that third class. But you guys have not done that. Mm-hmm. Despite, I assume, every opportunity in the world to do so. Why?
Can we ask Miles? You were the newest to join.
He's going to try and change that. So.
Well, actually, it's funny you asked.
This is a great point to announce benchmark growth.
We've got an even bigger dining room upstairs. How far can we stretch this triangle?
I think there is certainly all of those opportunities to do that. I think Sarah says it nicely in part, like our job, we're really focused on how do we scale those companies, right? And how, as part of that, having a relationship that doesn't get sort of adulted by this question of us making another commitment decision. It's like we're in, and we're not evaluating anymore. We're not deciding what a fair price is anymore. We're not trying to decide how to maybe make a strategic call with a company that optimizes for a moment for us to get more capital in. Like we want to remove any chance of doubt or alternative incentives or questions in that relationship, right? So it can be fully vulnerable. And if we do that well, and we've partnered with ideas with great purpose and a long, endless runway to work on, we'll scale. Our success will scale through their success, and we don't need to scale ourselves, independently of those companies scaling. And so, I think the beauty of being small is like we'll all do perfectly well.
But they're literally like $1 million bills on the ground for you to pick up if you were to just put more money in your own companies.
I totally agree with Miles, and I would just add one thing is like, it doesn't feel like work if you love doing it. What do you love doing? And I think that's the biggest thing, which is if you love working with founders, then you want to spend your time working with founders. And that means you don't want to spend your time managing a staff that's scaling. You don't want to spend your time doing marketing to LPs or others. Like, you don't want to spend your time meeting investments that are outside of your purview. Like, it's just like, that's like, you want to spend your time with those founders. And I think that's what do you love doing? And I think that's the biggest thing. I don't think there's any question that over the last few years, the growth investors have done extraordinarily well. And there was millions of dollars to be picked up doing that. But I think the question of like, what do you love doing really resonates. And one thing that's super nice is, the cycles turn and strategy persists through cycles. And so I also don't worry about $100 million holes.
Right.
And
we were joking before we started, like, I would imagine when we're here eating dinner, you guys must be licking your chops right now. Like, this is your time to shine here in late 2022.
Totally.
Well, yeah. With the caveat that I think we sort of, because we're early stage, what does that mean? It's moved, in terms of its definition. We have faith that every year some number above zero, companies will be founded that are going to be worth more than $10 billion. And then about every 2 or 3 years, a company is going to be founded that's going to be worth more than $100 billion. And it seems to be independent of the cycle. So yeah, things get a little crazier when things are, and they get a little depressed. But the growth fund thing, I'll come back to answer it a little differently, which is that I would like this group, I guess I'm part of this group, to set a high watermark for a multiple on a fund. And I think it's kind of fun to think about, okay, it's great you can scale capital, but if we had a 20x fund, could we get a fixed 50x fund? I'm not sure we can do that if we start. All we're doing, we're investing more money in late stages, we're lowering our returns. Mm-hmm. That's all we're doing because our commitment is fixed. It's not like we're going to be more committed. So you could say you're getting more cash on cash return. Yeah, but we're lowering our returns. And the hack of the venture business, which is coupling, capital from other people and ourselves with the partnership that it comes with, I think it's a little more inflamed when you're stuffing large sums of money into a company as it gets, as opposed to keeping it pure. And I will say, what would make me proud is if this team, maybe after I'm gone, sets a new high watermark. They won't do that with a growth fund. And the rest of it, it's like, should we care? That's cash flowing on. Yeah, but I also want to know with our limited partners say, there's nothing like a benchmark fund. And when it works, it sets the pace in the industry. And so,
It's sort of like there's the quote Sarah and I used with a team the other day, the Johnny Ive quote, right? Of what's focus?
I was going to say the same
right?
thing.
It's like
totally.
Focus is when, in some ways, every bone in your body thinks an idea is a really good idea, but you don't do it.
Yeah.
And
it's about saying no.
And it's a fine idea. We would, I think, it's not to say we don't have opinions on later stage
if you guys had a
ideas
$1 billion opportunity fund stapled to benchmark with the same team, you would for sure have good returns.
It would be one of the best growth funds in the industry. And
we like to think so.
But that's not
if we're going to do it. But I think to be able to have that focus, that a conversation on Monday and our time together on Monday is an hour of roving curiosity of fertile ideas, right at the edges that seem weird and bizarre.
Or at least you got to be weird.
Instead of okay, what's the growth pipeline, and is that a good valuation? Is now a good moment to sort of get in? And I think it's the focus is.
And we'd have to have a CRM if we did a growth.
Sorry, that it's for us it is at the end we're all here because we want to partner with founders as early as possible in that kind of relationship on the board. And anything, to this Johnny Ive, just the focus, like anything that distracts from that. And we have 5 people. This is it. And the capacity to take on more things. We got to ask you about
the principal program, but we'll come back to that.
But the capacity to take on more things would take away from our, getting in the room with that founder who is going to build that next iconic company and supporting the ones that we have. And so we're forced in a way by the constraint of how many people, the SEAL team of 6 people, never being more than that, to be ruthlessly focused. And that's what we're here for.
That's super real. I mean, the just to validate it, there's lots of opportunities that you can always pursue that seem like good ideas. And we have this struggle at Acquired. We're 2 people.
Oh my God.
And there's a thing that we know is uniquely differentiating, which is these ridiculous deep dive podcasts that are just us. And sometimes we have guests. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for doing this with us. But we know that the most differentiating thing that we do is this unique format that just we can do.
Totally.
And every time we start taking on more stuff, I'm like, oh man, the golden goose is getting worse. I can feel the golden goose getting worse because we're doing other stuff.
You're really good about keeping us both honest on that too. That's
It's funny that you use that phrase. In 2008, this was the first time somebody said to me, you should consider venture capital. I didn't join Benchmark until 2014, so 2008. And a very famous, nameless venture capitalist said, our early stage program is our golden goose.
How much AUM does that famous venture capital firm have now?
That early stage, that's everything that we do protects That golden goose.
Longtime listeners will probably know exactly what you're talking about. But.
So, Peter, I just want to clarify something that you said. It's interesting. You defined the scoreboard as fund multiple, and it's not total cash return to LPs. And I think that's an interesting, that's a clarifying mindset about the way that you guys look at this.
I can tell you this. I think of it as an LP, and the benchmark fund. Of course, again, the purpose is not. We don't show up and say, "Let's drive returns." It would be alienating to everything we stand for to think of it that way. It's the outcome, right? Not the input. But I think the cash on cash multiple, both as an LP, and it's a real problem for our LPs, I will say, because we have large LPs who look at us and like, why do we waste our time with benchmark? We're a toy. And I say, yes,
can you
right.
say the number of your largest LP, like what their dollar per fund?
They're like 25, 30 million. I could get it wrong. I'd probably piss one of them off if listen to this. But,
just in the context of a Harvard or Stanford, tiny, that's nothing. That's barely worth their time, right?
Except for when we have high multiple.
Right, except for
when it works, it matters.
Some of our retired partners are our largest LPs.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And
paying full fees.
There's some discussion among some people in the firm that over time is the way the model sort of endures, is that the LPs become the former GPs. It's not. It's hard to say that the LP construction has much to do with anything of our day-to-day performance. I do think this idea, though, of the principle of the firm being standards of asymmetry in our exposure to the volatile material of the startup. Asymmetry is a 20x, 50x, 100x fund. And if we degrade that, it sort of misses the point, And I want this to be, and many of us are at this place where we pay crazy. As a GP, I pay carried interest and management fee to my fellow GPs as an LP. And that's crazy. And this is.
You don't get like a GP allocation that doesn't.
I get a tiny, in my view, little.
Now we expose the tension.
But for the super majority of my investment in Benchmark, I'm paying limited partner rates and management fees.
But I would say that's where
it's not tax efficient. But this is the point. We have aunts and uncles. We don't have overlords that are there getting their
to the point of equality, right? Like an equal partnership, like that is taking it to every extreme along the way.
You never want the new partner to feel like they're working for Peter, in this case.
Am I understanding this right? That the longer tenure you have as a benchmark GP, the worse your economic deal gets.
It's the same.
Wow, that's a horrible way to characterize
it. As your LP commitment goes up and you're paying fees and carry on.
You know what? I think the counter argument. What would Bruce? The Bruce counter argument, which I think is 100% right, is it isn't the worst economic. It's not a worse economic arrangement because the returns will be higher. So you'd be happy to pay the fees.
This is the Mike Moritz thesis of every successive generation of technology should be bigger outcomes.
That's right.
Because you're addressing bigger markets.
I'll make it more simple. You cannot get allocation to the benchmark funds. And so getting any allocation is going to be better than the alternative.
You're happy to pay the fees.
I see.
You're happy to pay the fees and carry because it works and it's still the best.
I see. Your marginal economic deal goes down, but your aggregate economic deal gets better.
Your cash on cash, even though your multiple goes down, your cash on cash.
You guys know more about this than we do.
Well, we did spend a lot of time studying you guys.
We all learned from the
Okay, wait, one more thing I want to say, because I kind of think only we can say this. You can't really say this on the strategy before we move on. I think one of the most persuasive things that we heard in our research for part one about maintaining the model is we definitely talked to entrepreneurs in the current benchmark portfolio who believe that aggregate in the long run, they took less dilution by having benchmark invest and you guys not having a growth fund and having to put more money into them than they would have had you or whatever early stage firm they had taken money from been wanting to put more money in subsequent rounds. Because just to connect the dots, if that had been the case, then you would be have a conflict as that investor when things are going well to put more money in at a better advantaged valuation for yourself. And you don't have that conflict.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth? Who got the truth now?